When Mark came up from the basement, his face looked like he'd seen a ghost. The man had served 3 tours overseas, fixed bridges under mortar fire, and never once lost his cool. But now, he was pale, silent, his hands trembling just slightly as he grabbed his jacket from the chair. "Lauren," he said, voice flat and sharp, "pack your gear, we're leaving, don't call your sister." I blinked at him. "What? What are you talking about?" He didn't answer, just kept moving, checking the windows, glancing toward the front door like something might burst through it any second. "Mark," I said again, louder this time. "What's going on?" He looked at me finally, eyes cold and focused. "Please, just trust me. We need to leave this house right now." I stared at him, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I'd known Mark Given since my first deployment. He wasn't dramatic, he wasn't paranoid. If he said something wasn't safe, it wasn't safe. Still, this was my home, or at least what was left of it after everything. "My sister will freak out if we just—" "Lauren." His voice cracked like a whip. "Do not call her, not now." That's when I saw the look in his eyes, fear. Not panic, not anger, but something colder. Controlled fear. The kind that meant he'd already seen something he couldn't unsee. 10 minutes later, we were throwing bags into the back of his truck. My phone kept lighting up on the counter, Monica calling. Over and over again. I almost answered once, thumb hovering over the screen, but Mark snatched the phone from me. "You want to live? Don't pick up." I didn't argue again. The night air outside was heavy with rain. The house behind us sat quiet and perfect, the kind of quiet that felt wrong. Every light off, every window closed. It was the same house we grew up in, the one my father built after he retired from the Corps. He called it the Fort. Solid, practical, efficient, just like him. Now it felt like something else entirely. We got into the truck. Mark started the engine, and the headlights cut through the wet dark. For a moment, I looked back at the porch light, that little square of yellow my sister had installed herself. She said it made the place look warmer. It looked like a trap now. Mark drove fast but steady. No music, no small talk. Just the wipers scraping back and forth and the low hum of the engine. I wanted to ask questions, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched the streetlights blur past, thinking about how the last few weeks had gone from homecoming to something I couldn't even name. 3 months ago, I'd been a captain in the Army Corps of Engineers, stationed at Fort Leonard Wood. 15 years in uniform, multiple deployments, commendations, and enough scars inside and out to last a lifetime. When I finally signed the discharge papers, I thought I was ready to come home. Monica picked me up at the bus station. She hugged me like she meant it, crying just a little. Said she'd been fixing up Dad's old place for me, made it energy efficient, new vents, sealed windows, all that. Said it would feel fresh again. It did. Too fresh, too still. The air in that house didn't move right. But I didn't think much of it at first. Now, sitting in Mark's truck, I was starting to realize maybe I should have. The rain turned into a downpour. The highway stretched empty ahead of us. Mark's jaw worked as he clenched and unclenched it, like he was debating whether to speak. I broke first. "You want to tell me what the hell just happened back there?" He didn't look at me. "I'll tell you when we're clear." "Clear of what? My sister's driveway?" He sighed. "Clear of her reach." That shut me up. We drove another 10 minutes before he pulled into a gas station that looked like it hadn't seen business since the 90s, one flickering light above the pumps. The rain softened to a mist. Mark cut the engine. "You remember how your dad used to run the generator test every month?" "Yeah," I said. "Said it was good discipline." "He ever tell you why he did it?" "Because he didn't trust the power company." Mark nodded, staring out the windshield. "He didn't trust a lot of people. He built that house to be self-contained air system, water system, everything. He built it so his family could survive anything." "Yeah, I know all that. What's your point?" "My point," he said slowly, "is that someone's been modifying it." I frowned. "Monica's been remodeling. You know that." "This wasn't remodeling. This was engineering." He turned toward me then, serious as I'd ever seen him. "There's a system running under that house that your father didn't install. And it's not for heating or cooling." My pulse spiked. "What are you talking about?" I found lines metallic, narrow, rerouted into the ventilation shafts, and a small box near the water heater with electrical hookups that don't belong to any standard system. There's a timer attached. "A timer for what?" Mark just shook his head. Not sure yet. But whatever it's for, it's not good. You've been getting headaches lately, right? That caught me off guard. How do you? You mentioned it last week. Dizziness, nausea. You thought it was PTSD. Yeah. He looked at me, and for a second I saw something that scared me more than his words' certainty. Lauren, he said quietly, I think someone's trying to poison you. The world went still, just the sound of rain against the windshield. I laughed, but it came out thin. That's ridiculous. Monica would never… He cut me off. You sure about that? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say it fast and loud and certain, but the truth stuck in my throat. For weeks, she'd been hovering too sweet, too helpful, bringing tea I didn't ask for, replacing the air filters just to help, locking the basement and saying she'd lost the key. I thought she was just being Monica. Now, sitting there in the dark with Mark's words hanging in the air, it didn't feel like that anymore. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, swiping through pictures. Look, he said. On the screen were photos of the basement pipes, a control box, something that looked like a gas valve connected to a digital timer. This isn't just amateur work, Mark said. Whoever did this knows flow systems, understands how to control air distribution. Your sister's boyfriend. What's his name again? Evan, I said slowly. Evan Laird. Mark's jaw tightened. Yeah. He used to work for Beckett Industrial, right? Your dad's old company. I nodded. Got fired for safety violations, Mark added. 3 years before your dad died. That was news to me. I stared at the photos again. My stomach turned cold. Mark leaned back, still watching me. You starting to see it? No, I said automatically. No, I'm not. But I was. Every headache, every dizzy spell, every night I'd woken up short of breath, they all fit together now, too perfectly. Mark started the truck again. We're going to the motel off Route 7, somewhere with fresh air. After that, we'll figure out what to do next. I didn't answer. I just stared out the window as the house that used to feel like safety disappeared behind us, swallowed by the rain and the dark. The phone in my lap started buzzing again. Monica's name. Mark didn't even look. Don't pick up, he said quietly. I didn't. The motel room smelled like bleach and stale air. I sat on the edge of the bed while the TV muttered some late-night infomercial about adjustable wrenches. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Mark was pacing, phone in one hand, the other still stained with dirt from the basement. He didn't talk much, and I didn't ask. My thoughts were too loud anyway about Monica, about that house, about what the hell could have been in those pipes. When the rain finally stopped, the silence was almost worse. Mark sat down across from me, elbows on his knees. You look like you haven't slept in days. I haven't, I said. Hard to sleep when your sister might be trying to kill you. Mark gave me a look halfway between sympathy and disbelief. You don't know that yet. Don't I asked. Because right now, that's the only thing that makes sense. He didn't argue. Just pulled a file from his bag, army habit. I did some digging before I came by tonight. I didn't tell you, because I wasn't sure what I was seeing. Digging into what? He laid out a few printouts. Building permits. Your sister filed them 6 months ago, said she was upgrading the heating system for better insulation. That's when the first modifications showed up. 6 months, I muttered. That's around the time I put in my retirement request. Yeah, Mark said quietly. Almost like she was getting ready for your homecoming. The idea hit like a punch. I pushed the papers away. You're saying she planned this? I'm saying nothing about this was random. Whoever helped her knew exactly what they were doing. Those weren't home improvement tweaks. They were structural alterations. My throat went dry. You think Evan's involved? Mark nodded slowly. He used to be a systems tech for your dad's company. He had access to blueprints, to materials stuff most people wouldn't even think to use in a house. I leaned back, staring at the ugly motel wallpaper. So what, he teams up with Monica and they decide to gas me like a rat? Mark's jaw tightened. I've seen people kill for less. Money, revenge, maybe both. The word revenge made my chest tighten. My father, John Beckett, wasn't a man people crossed lightly. He built half the industrial structures in our county, ran his company with military precision, and expected the same from everyone, including his kids. Monica never forgave him for that. She said he treated her like a project, not a daughter. When he died, she inherited half of everything. Money, property, equipment. I didn't want my share. I told her to keep it. She said that's exactly what he would have done. Favor the soldier over the family. I hadn't thought much about it then. Now it felt like a warning I ignored. Mark broke the silence. Lauren, I know you don't want to believe it, but this isn't just bad wiring or a misunderstanding. That setup in your basement, someone engineered it to kill you slowly. Carbon monoxide leaks, controlled doses, fake detectors. If we hadn't checked, you'd be dead in a month. I didn't respond. I just kept hearing her voice in my head, Monica laughing, saying she was proud of me, saying she'd make the place feel like home again. She'd made it feel like a coffin. Mark stood up and grabbed his jacket. I'm going to make a few calls. Old contacts at the county office. See if there's anything else. Where are you going? Don't worry, just stay here, lock the door, don't answer for anyone, especially her. He left before I could say anything else. The clock said 3:17 a.m. When I finally stopped staring at the door, I lay down but didn't close my eyes. The hum of the old air conditioner felt too loud. My head ached like I'd swallowed ice. For a minute, I thought about calling Monica just to hear her voice, just to ask her why. But every time I reached for my phone, I remembered Mark's words. You want to live? Don't pick up. The next morning, the sunlight through the curtains looked like the kind that burns instead of warms. Mark came back with coffee and a look that told me the news wasn't good. He set a manila folder on the table. Your sister's boyfriend has a company registered under his name, Laird Systems, small-time maintenance contractor, on paper. But they've been subcontracted for multiple ventilation and insulation projects over the past 2 years. One of them was your house. I took a sip of the bitter motel coffee. Let me guess he used it to get access to materials. More than that, Mark said. I called a buddy from the city inspection office. They flagged a report from one of his old job sites, a CO leak in a senior housing complex. No casualties, but it was suspicious. The report vanished before it reached the county database. End for it. So, he's done this before. Mark nodded. He's careful. He knows how to make it look like an accident, or a health condition, like PTSD. The room spun for a second. The doctor said my symptoms were stress-related. Mark leaned forward. That's exactly what he wanted you to think. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a soldier. I felt like a target. I rubbed my temples, trying to focus. What now? We can't exactly go to the police with a theory. When? We don't have to, he said. We get proof. Real, physical proof. I'll need to go back into that basement, but not tonight. Why not? Because they'll be watching. Once they realize we're gone, they'll check the house. We need to be smart. Smart? I said bitterly. Mark, my sister might be plotting my death and you want to wait for a convenient time? He didn't flinch. I want you alive. That's all. That shut me up. He looked out the window, watching cars roll by. We'll go back tomorrow, early morning. You stay here. Don't use your credit card. Don't log into anything. They might track your activity. Jesus, I muttered. I came home to relax, not to go back to operational security. Mark cracked a faint smile. Welcome home, Captain. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. When he left again, I took another look at the photos on his phone. Pipes, valves, wiring. It didn't look like murder. It looked like maintenance. That's what made it worse. Murder dressed up as care. A few hours passed. The sun climbed higher. I stared at the peeling wallpaper until it started to blur. Then my phone buzzed. Private number. I shouldn't have answered. Lauren, a voice said softly. Monica's. Calm, steady, familiar. You didn't answer my calls last night. Are you okay? Every instinct told me to hang up, but my mouth moved before my brain caught up. I'm fine. She hesitated. Mark's been acting strange. I saw his truck near the house. What's going on? My pulse kicked hard. Nothing, just maintenance stuff. She laughed, low and easy. You sound nervous. Did something happen? I didn't answer. Lauren, she said again, you know you can trust me, right? The line crackled. I could almost hear her smiling. Of course, I said, my voice steadying. Always. I hung up before she could reply. The coffee tasted like burnt rubber, but I drank it anyway. The caffeine wasn't helping. My head still throbbed like I'd been wearing my helmet too tight for 3 days straight. I told myself it was stress, bad sleep, dehydration, anything but the thought that someone might have been slowly poisoning me. By noon, Mark was gone again, this time chasing down a contact from his old unit who worked at the state lab. I stayed in the motel, curtains closed, lights off, laptop untouched. Paranoia wasn't something I believed in until that morning when the cleaning lady knocked and I nearly drew my old service knife out of habit. It's amazing how fast a soldier's instincts come back when trust disappears. At 2 p.m., I threw on my jacket and stepped outside for air. The parking lot shimmered under the Missouri heat, the kind that makes the horizon dance. Across the street was a diner called Marty's Stop, with peeling paint and a sign that read breakfast all day. It looked harmless enough, exactly the kind of place where bad things don't happen. Inside, the air smelled like bacon grease and overcooked coffee. I picked a corner booth, ordered toast, and tried to remember when I'd last eaten something that wasn't from a vending machine. I caught my reflection in the window. My skin was paler than I remembered, a faint bluish tinge under the eyes. I looked tired, weak, not the captain who used to run a construction team through dust storms. That's when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Captain Beckett? The voice was male, calm, official. This is Dr. Raymond Clark from the VA hospital in Springfield. You came in for testing last week, correct? Yeah. I'm calling because your results flagged elevated carbon monoxide exposure. Have you had your home systems checked recently? My grip on the phone tightened. Yeah, I said carefully. I had someone take a look. 1. I recommend staying somewhere else until a certified inspector clears your residence, Clark said. Symptoms like headaches, fatigue, or confusion can worsen with continued exposure. I stared at the chrome napkin holder on the table, my reflection warped and small. Yeah, I'll take care of it. He paused. Ma'am, are you currently in a safe environment? That question hit harder than I expected. I think so, I said quietly. Thanks, doctor. When I hung up, I noticed something strange. Across the street, a dark blue sedan sat parked facing the diner. Tinted windows, no plates on the front, same shape, same color as the one I'd seen outside my house 2 nights ago. Coincidence, maybe? But coincidence was starting to feel like a luxury I couldn't afford. I left cash on the table and walked out without finishing my toast. Back in the motel, the air felt heavier. The moment I closed the door, I smelled it faint, metallic, almost like exhaust. I froze. Then I realized the vent was humming even though I hadn't turned on the air conditioner. I grabbed a chair, climbed up, and yanked the cover off. A cheap carbon monoxide detector was taped inside, blinking green. Too green. The kind that fakes a signal loop to look functional. Mark had warned me. If they know you're gone, they'll track you. If they can't find you, they'll make you come back. I packed my duffel in record time. As I was zipping it shut, the door handle moved slow, deliberate. I drew the knife from my boot and stepped quietly to the side. Then a voice said, Lauren, it's me. I let out a shaky breath and opened the door. Mark stood there, soaked in sweat, eyes darting past me before stepping inside. You okay? I am now, I said, sliding the knife back. You planning to knock next time? He ignored the jab. We've got a problem. That's new. He set his phone on the table, showing a map with GPS pins. County records show Evan's van made 3 trips to your property in the last 2 weeks, late at night. The guy used a business account to access restricted materials, pressure valves, line couplings, solenoid timers, same components I saw in your basement. So, it's official, I said, sitting down. They were building a death trap. Mark rubbed his face. Worse. It's designed to mimic slow, onset CO exposure. The system releases gas only when the furnace kicks on at night during rest hours. You'd just feel sick, sleep more, fade out. No signs of struggle. Everyone would blame PTSD and exhaustion. My stomach turned. Jesus Christ. He nodded grimly. The VA report confirmed your blood levels. You were about 2 weeks away from permanent damage. I sank back in the chair, silent. For a minute, all I could hear was the hum of the fridge. Mark leaned forward. There's more. Evan's company isn't registered under his name anymore. It's under Monica's. iLibre. That hit harder than I expected. You're sure? He nodded. She's the majority owner. Filed last spring, right after you told her you were coming home. I wanted to laugh, scream, maybe both. Instead, I just said, "Of course she did." Mark poured himself a cup of the motel's awful coffee. "We need evidence before we go to the cops. Not theories, not guesses, proof that ties both of them to that system. Meaning? We go back. We document everything. Photos, recordings, the works. And we do it before they realize what we know." I looked at the window. The same blue sedan was parked across the street now, closer this time. Pretty sure they already do. Mark followed my gaze, cursed under his breath, then pulled the curtain shut. "All right. Change of plan. We keep moving. They can't track what isn't still." I nodded, throwing my bag over my shoulder. "Where to?" "There's a safe house near Fairview old training property we used during hurricane relief drills. No one knows it exists except a handful of us." He checked his watch. "We leave in 5 minutes." I took one last look around the room, at the vent cover lying on the floor, the faint hum still echoing. "Mark?" "Yeah?" "If this is real, and I'm not saying it isn't, but if Monica's actually behind this, why me?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Because you're the one thing your father loved that she couldn't control." That shut me up. We drove west, keeping to back roads. No headlights for long stretches. Just the dim glow from the dash. My thoughts went places I didn't want them to. The kind of places where family becomes threat and home becomes battleground. At one point, Mark reached over and turned on the radio. Some old rock station cutting through static. "You good?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Just thinking. Try not to overdo it," he said. "We've got enough to handle without you spiraling." I managed a half smile. "You forget who taught you not to spiral?" He chuckled once, low. "Touché." Outside, the rain started again, light, steady, cleansing. But nothing about any of this felt clean. We passed the old county line sign, paint faded, metal rusting at the edges. Mark downshifted as we turned onto a narrow road surrounded by trees. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, familiar and foreign all at once. "Almost there," he muttered, eyes fixed ahead. I nodded, gripping the door handle tight. Somewhere behind us, on the empty stretch of road, headlights appeared. 2 of them, then 4, closing in. The headlights behind us stayed too steady to be random. Mark noticed them the same second I did. He didn't say a word, just eased his foot off the gas and let the truck drift a little to the right, testing. The car behind us matched the move exactly. "Don't look back," he said quietly. I kept my eyes forward, but my pulse picked up fast. The trees on both sides of the road blurred into dark streaks. "How sure are you it's them?" I asked. "Sure enough," he said, checking the mirror again. "They've been on us since the county line." He flicked the turn signal like we were just 2 tired people looking for a place to crash, then pulled into an old rest stop. A single light flickered above a soda machine that probably hadn't worked in a decade. The car behind us rolled past slowly, then kept going. "See?" I said, half joking. "Maybe it's just a coincidence." Mark turned off the ignition. "Yeah, sure. Coincidences that tail you through 3 turns and a dirt road." We waited in silence for a minute. The rain tapped against the roof, steady and thin. He leaned forward, watching the rear view. No headlights. "All right," he said. "We'll give it 5 more minutes, then move." "And to Kristen." I nodded, but my mind was already somewhere else back in that basement. The smell of metal and damp air, the cold concrete floor my father used to stand on when he built his workshop. I could still picture the workbench he made from reclaimed oak, the way he organized every bolt by size. That space was his pride, his sanctuary. Now, it might have been the place my sister turned into a weapon. Mark started the truck again once the road looked clear. "We'll head back to your house in daylight," he said. "No one expects people to sneak around when the sun's up." "Smart," I said. "We'll look like contractors, not fugitives." He smiled a little. "Exactly." The safe house turned out to be an old training cabin hidden off a logging trail, about as subtle as a shipping container buried in weeds. Inside, there was dust, old rations, a cot, and not much else. But it was safe. By sunrise, Mark was already up, brewing instant coffee with water from a plastic jug. "You ready?" he asked when I came out of the back room. Define ready. He handed me a cup, ready enough to find out what your sister's been doing in your basement. We drove back to town through the narrow back roads, avoiding the main routes. I wore a cap pulled low, an old hoodie, and sunglasses. We parked 2 blocks away from the house, hidden behind a line of trash bins. The neighborhood looked the same as ever: quiet, freshly mowed lawns, a few flags still up from Memorial Day. The kind of place where everyone waves and minds their own business. Mark checked his watch. Monica works mornings, right? Yeah, Evan usually comes by in the afternoon. Perfect, he said. We go in, take what we need, and get out before lunch. I had the spare key. She didn't know I still kept the one Dad gave me before I left for my last deployment. The lock turned easily. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly chemical. Mark moved first, scanning every room with his flashlight. He wasn't being dramatic, he was being trained. I followed, my boots barely making a sound on the hardwood. Everything looked exactly like Monica had left it. The kitchen spotless, not a plate out of place. The framed family photos still on the wall. One of them showed me and her at Dad's retirement ceremony. She was smiling like she meant it. Maybe she did. Maybe that's what made it worse. We headed to the basement door. She'd changed the lock, but Mark pulled out his toolkit like it was nothing. The latch gave with a soft click. The air that came out was thick and sour. I went down first, slow and careful. The light switch didn't work. Mark flicked on his flashlight, cutting a narrow beam through the dark. The basement had changed. The walls were painted over, a new layer of drywall added on top of the old concrete. My father's workbench was gone. So was the old furnace panel. Jesus, I whispered. She gutted it. Mark knelt near the corner where the pipes ran up the wall. No, she covered it. Look here. He ran his fingers along a small bulge in the wall, then pried it open with a flat screwdriver. Behind it was a maze of copper tubing, valves, and wiring. Same pattern as before, he said. Flow control system, but this, he pointed to a silver box wired to a digital timer. This is industrial. You can't buy this at Home Depot. My stomach turned. She really went all in, huh? Yeah. She had help. Evan's fingerprints are all over this kind of work. But the planning? That's her. Look here. He pulled aside a small panel of insulation. Behind it, written in black marker, were letters. PR2. What does that mean? Mark frowned. Project Renewal. That's what your dad called his prototype for an automated air filtration system. He scrapped it because it was unstable, could backfeed exhaust into sealed rooms. I stared at the letters. You're telling me Monica rebuilt Dad's failed project? He nodded. And weaponized it. I felt the room tilt for a second. My chest was tight, my hands shaking even though the air was cold. Mark took out his phone, started snapping photos. We'll need every angle valves, control box, timers, the vent seals. Once we have this, we go straight to the police. But something about that felt wrong. Too easy. Too neat. I stepped toward the old furnace area, where the concrete was darker. My boot hit something hollow. I crouched and brushed away a thin layer of dust. There was a hatch, small but visible. Mark, I said, you ever see this before? He crouched beside me. No, that wasn't here last time. We pried it open. Inside, there was a black plastic case, sealed tight with duct tape. I pulled it out and set it on the floor. Mark took out his pocket knife and cut the tape. Inside were papers, a hard drive, and a flash drive labeled Renewal Data. I picked up one of the papers. It was a schematic detailed airflow models, CO distribution patterns, and exposure timelines. Someone had been documenting everything. At the bottom of the page, written in neat block letters, was a note. Test subject, L. Beckett. Estimated exposure, 4-6 months. Symptom onset, consistent with PTSD misdiagnosis. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Mark read over my shoulder, his expression hardening. That's premeditated, Lauren, not just intent. Execution. My knees felt weak. She wrote this like a research project. He pocketed the hard drive and the flash drive. We've got enough to bury them. But then, faintly, I heard it a creak from upstairs. Mark froze. We both looked toward the basement steps. Light shifted near the doorframe. Someone was home. He motioned for me to kill the flashlight. The dark swallowed us whole. A voice drifted down, casual, Soft, too calm. Lauren? It was Monica. Mark didn't move. Neither did I. The sound of her voice coming from upstairs felt like something out of a dream that had turned wrong halfway through. Lauren? She called again, soft, almost sweet, like she was offering coffee instead of walking into a trap. Mark mouthed, "Don't answer." We stood there in silence, waiting. Her footsteps creaked above us, slow and steady, like she was stalling, listening for us. Mark's eyes swept the room. He gestured toward the side exit, the one that led to the storm door under the stairs. I nodded and started moving, slow and silent. The metal latch was stiff, but gave with a small pop. The second it did, Monica's footsteps stopped. Mark whispered, "Go." We slipped out, crouched low, and moved along the back wall of the house until we hit the tree line. The air outside was cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs. I didn't breathe until we were 50 yards away. The house, a dark outline behind the branches. Mark stopped, pulled out his phone, and turned off the flashlight. "She knows," he said quietly. I figured that out when she said my name like I'd left the stove on. He gave me a look. "Not funny." "No," I said. "But it's true." We didn't go back to the safe house that night. We drove until the gas light came on, then pulled into another roadside motel. One of those places that rents by the hour or to people running from their lives. The sign out front just said vacancy in half-lit red. Inside, the room smelled like mildew and cheap air freshener. I didn't care. I sat down on the bed and started laughing quiet, short bursts that didn't sound like me. Mark looked at me like I'd cracked. "You all right?" "No," I said, "but that's the first honest answer I've given all day." He set the bag of evidence on the table and locked the door with every bolt it had. "We've got enough proof to get the police involved now." I rubbed my temples. "You really think they'll believe my sister set up a chemical murder experiment in my basement?" "They'll believe it when they see the schematics," he said, "and when they hear the recordings." "And what recordings?" He pulled a small black device from his jacket. "Body cam. I had it running since the minute we stepped inside. That, somehow, was the first thing that made me exhale." Mark poured himself a cup of the awful coffee from the motel machine and sat down across from me. "You should sleep." I shook my head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that note. Test subject, L. Beckett." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The clock on the nightstand blinked 1:42 a.m. The neon from the sign outside pulsed through the curtains, painting the room red, then black, red, then black again. I tried lying down, but my brain wouldn't stop replaying it all. Monica's smile at the bus station, the way she brushed dust off my sleeve and said, "You're finally home." The same hands that installed the vents, that cooked me dinner, that hugged me after Dad's funeral. Those hands had drawn my name on a test sheet. At 3, I gave up on pretending to sleep. Mark was still awake, sitting by the window with the gun from his glove box resting on the nightstand. His eyes were open but unfocused, watching the rain smear against the glass. "Remember Iraq?" he said quietly. "The convoy ambush outside Nasiriyah?" I nodded. "How could I forget? You remember what you told me after? About never being surprised by what people are capable of when they're desperate?" "Yeah." He turned his head slightly, looking at me. "You were right, and I think that's what's happening here." I wanted to argue, to tell him this wasn't the same, but it was. Desperation made people do things they swore they'd never do. By dawn, we were still awake. Mark had mapped out a plan: go to the local police station with the evidence, then move everything up the chain if the county was compromised. He wanted to get a head start before Monica and Evan realized what we'd taken. While he packed, I stepped outside. The parking lot was empty, except for one black SUV idling across the street. I froze, watching the faint outline of someone inside holding a phone to their ear. Mark came up behind me. "Inside. Now." We shut the door, turned off the lights, and stayed silent. The hum of the SUV's engine carried faintly through the window. Then, after a minute, it drove off. I leaned against the wall. "We can't stay here." "I know," Mark said. "Grab your things. We'll go to the next town. House it." But before we could move, my phone buzzed. Private number again. Mark shook his head. "Don't." I looked at the screen. What if it's the police? It's not. He was right. When I answered, I didn't even have to say hello. Monica's voice came through, low and calm. Lauren, I saw you at the house. My throat went dry. You shouldn't have gone in there, she continued. You don't understand what you've done. What I've done? I snapped. You built a system to kill me. There was a long pause. Then she laughed, soft, sad, almost. You always think everything's about you. Explain the notes then. Explain Project Renewal. You wouldn't understand, she said. You never did. Dad ruined everything, and you just picked up where he left off. Mark mouthed, keep her talking, and started recording on his phone. Ruined what? I asked. Me, she said simply. He made me feel small every day of my life. Then you came back from the army, and suddenly you were the perfect soldier daughter he always wanted. You got his respect. I got his silence. Her tone shifted, sharp as glass. That house should have been mine alone, his company too, but you couldn't leave well enough alone. You had to come home. I clenched my jaw. So you decided to erase me? I decided to finish what he started, she said, her voice low now. You don't get it, Lauren. This wasn't about killing you. It was about balance. The line went dead. Mark lowered his phone, eyes hard. Got it all recorded. I sank onto the edge of the bed, shaking. She's lost her mind. She's not crazy, Mark said. She's calculated. There's a difference. He zipped up his bag and slung it over his shoulder. We're leaving before she gets a chance to find us again. We loaded the truck just as the sun cracked over the horizon. The air smelled wet and metallic, and for the first time, I noticed the faint ache in my chest easing. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe relief, either way, it didn't last. As we pulled onto the highway, a black sedan merged into traffic 3 cars behind us. Mark caught it in the mirror and muttered, We've got company. Same one? Looks like it. I didn't look back. I just tightened my seatbelt and said quietly, Then let's end this. The sedan followed us for 15 miles, never getting too close, never falling too far behind. Mark finally pulled into a truck stop outside Branson, a place with too much noise and too many cameras for anyone to try something stupid. He parked on the far end of the lot and turned off the engine. If they're still out there, they'll have to show themselves. We sat for a full minute, watching the entrance. Trucks rolled in, people filled up gas, someone's dog barked from a back seat. The sedan didn't appear. Guess they don't like daylight, I muttered. Mark glanced at me. They don't like witnesses. He got out first, walked to the diner attached to the station, and signaled for me to follow. Inside, it smelled like burnt coffee and fried oil, but it was safe enough. We took a booth near the back. He opened his laptop and started connecting cables to the flash drive we'd taken from the basement. You really think that old thing still works? I asked. He smirked. If it doesn't, I've got backups. I cloned it last night. When the screen lit up, the first thing that appeared was a folder titled Project Renewal, Phase 2. Inside were logs, schematics, and data spreadsheets. Everything looked professional, too professional for a backyard experiment. Mark clicked through one file labeled Exposure Calculations. He frowned. These are military-grade parameters. I leaned over. What do you mean? These tables, concentration levels, duration rates, they're modeled on real testing data. Someone used official research to build this. My stomach dropped. Where would Monica even get that kind of information? He hesitated. She wouldn't. But Evan might. He used to do contractor work with defense engineering firms, right? Yeah, before Dad fired him. Mark opened another folder labeled Correspondence. Dozens of emails popped up between 2 addresses, one belonging to Evan, the other to a burner domain. Read this, Mark said. The email chain was chilling. From Evan Laird to MH, progress steady. Phase 2 retrofit nearly complete. Subject showing early stage symptoms as predicted. Recommend activating backup system if exposure is interrupted. Mark's jaw clenched. Subject. He's talking about you. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. So it was both of them. There's no doubt now, he said. But what's this backup system? He scrolled down to a schematic labeled Failsafe Diagram, Vent Override. It showed a second valve network hidden behind the main furnace line, one we hadn't even seen. The note beside it read, Manual activation from basement or remote signal. That means they can trigger it from anywhere, I said. Mark nodded. Exactly. If you'd gone home tonight, that system could have flooded the whole room before you even noticed. End of 2-9. He closed the laptop and leaned back, exhaling hard. They built a weapon and called it a renovation. I tried to steady my voice. We need to go to the police. Not yet, he said. We can't walk in there with a pile of files and expect them to buy it. We need chain of custody, timestamps, verification that this was done by Evan and Monica. Otherwise, it's just hearsay. He was right, and I hated that he was right. Mark flagged down the waitress and ordered eggs and black coffee, like this was any other morning. I wasn't hungry, but I needed something to do with my hands, so I stirred sugar into my cup until the spoon clinked. How do you want to handle it? I asked. Simple, he said. We trace Evan's company, find his suppliers, his clients, and where the money came from. If he used any part of that business to build your system, it's federal. That's evidence no one can ignore. Now, he opened another document from the flash drive, a ledger labeled Material Orders. The purchases were split between two accounts, Laird Systems and Hale Home Design, Monica's real estate business. So she funded it, I said quietly. She paid for the equipment. Yeah, and look at the quantities, Mark added. She didn't just buy for your house. She ordered enough to modify 2 or 3 properties. I stared at the numbers. You think they've done this before? He shrugged. If it worked once, maybe they plan to replicate it. Quiet, slow, undetectable, perfect for insurance fraud. I felt sick. You think she's killed someone else? Maybe not yet, he said. But they were ready to. He pushed his plate away. We need to make copies of everything. Then we find someone we can trust. Who? He looked at me. The only one who owes your dad a favor. Remember Chief Daniels? Of course I did. Daniels had served with Dad back in the Corps before joining law enforcement. He'd helped with my enlistment paperwork. If anyone would listen, it was him. We paid and left through the side door. The air outside was cooler now, the kind that smells faintly of asphalt after rain. Mark checked the parking lot before we got in the truck. The sedan was back, parked 2 rows away. Don't react, he said. We climbed in, calm and deliberate. He started the engine and reversed. Not fast, but steady. The sedan followed. Guess they want to see what we found, I said. Mark pulled onto the highway and didn't slow down until we hit the city limits. We'll lose them in Springfield, he said. Too much traffic for them to keep line of sight. By the time we reached the old municipal district, he turned into a narrow alley behind a fire station. The sedan cruised past without stopping. Mark parked behind a dumpster and opened the glove box, pulling out a prepaid phone. Daniels doesn't use his work number for sensitive stuff. Try this one. He handed me the phone. My hands shook a little as I dialed. The line rang once before a gruff voice answered. Daniels. Chief, it's Lauren Beckett. There was a pause. Lauren? Been a long time. You all right? Not really. I need to talk to you. It's serious. His tone shifted immediately. You safe? For now. All right. You still got that old cabin your dad built by Miller Creek? Yeah. I'm Forden. Meet me there in an hour. Bring whoever's with you. Don't call again. The line went dead. Mark started the truck. That was fast. He didn't sound surprised, I said. He's military. He never is. We drove to the cabin through back roads. Only locals used half dirt, half pavement. The sky was starting to darken, clouds rolling in like smoke. When we arrived, Daniels was already there, standing on the porch with a cigarette, and that look cops get when they know trouble before you speak. He nodded once. Captain Beckett. Heard you retired. Trying to, I said. Mark handed him the flash drive. Everything's in there. Blueprints, data, communications, enough to make your hair turn gray. Daniels plugged it into his tablet. The light from the screen washed over his face as he scrolled. His jaw tightened. Jesus Christ, this is deliberate. Can you help? I asked. He looked up at me. If half of what's on here is real, this isn't just local. This is interstate conspiracy. You're talking fraud, attempted murder, and use of regulated materials without license. Mark leaned forward. Then what's our move? Daniels closed the tablet. I'll take this up the chain. Quietly. But you two need to disappear for a bit. Whoever's behind this won't wait around once they know this data's missing. I crossed my arms. Disappear where? He took a drag of his cigarette, exhaled slow. Anywhere that isn't here. Mark and I exchanged a look. When we turned back toward the cabin door, something in the distance glinted headlights reflecting off wet gravel. Daniels dropped the cigarette. Too late, they found you. The moment Daniels said, "They found you," Mark was already moving. He grabbed the flash drive, shoved it into his jacket pocket, and pushed me toward the back door. Gravel crunched outside, a sound too steady to be the rain. "Back exit," Daniels barked. "Trucks around the side." We slipped through the kitchen. The old floorboards complained with every step, and for the first time I hated the sound of wood under my boots. Mark pushed the door open just enough to look. 2 vehicles were pulling up the drive. 1 black SUV. 1 pickup. He turned to Daniels. "You armed?" The old man gave a half smile, pulling back his coat to reveal his sidearm. "Retired, not dead." We moved fast. Mark and I took the rear fence while Daniels stayed near the porch. The headlights cut through the trees like search beams. I could hear car doors opening. Voices low but firm. "She's here," someone said. "Daniels' truck's out front." Mark pushed me down behind a woodpile. "Stay low," he whispered. "Who the hell are they?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not cops. Evan's people." The crunch of boots grew closer. Then came Monica's voice, clear and calm. "Lauren, come on out, I just want to talk." My heart dropped. She sounded exactly like she used to when we were kids, and she was trying to talk me out of trouble. The same soft rhythm, the same false patience. Mark mouthed, "Don't." We stayed silent, listening. Daniel's voice broke the quiet. "You're trespassing, ma'am. This is private property." Monica answered smoothly. "So is the basement she broke into. We're just trying to collect what's ours." Mark clenched his jaw. "She's trying to bait us." Then came the sound of a gun cocking. Daniels again. "You should leave while you can." A pause. Then, a dull thud, something metal hitting the porch. "Flashbang!" Mark yelled, pulling me down. The explosion rattled my teeth. White light filled the trees, followed by shouting. Mark dragged me toward the fence as gunfire cracked from the cabin. We hit the back gate, climbed over, and dropped onto the service road behind the property. My knees hit dirt, but adrenaline kept me upright. Mark motioned for me to keep running. The world shrank to footsteps, breath, and the echo of shots fading behind us. We didn't stop until the cabin lights were nothing but a dim glow through the trees. When we finally slowed, I turned to him. "Daniels." "He's fine," Mark said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. "He's handled worse." We followed the dirt path until we hit a gravel lot by the main road. An old Chevy sat there, keys still in the ignition. Mark stared at it for a second, then gave a quick shrug. "Borrowing it." We got in. The seatbelt buckle was sticky with dried soda, the engine loud enough to wake a neighborhood, but it ran. Once we were back on the road, I checked my phone. No signal. Figures. Mark drove in silence for a while before saying, "They knew exactly where we were. Either Daniel's line was tapped or someone's feeding them." "You think Daniel set us up?" He shook his head. "No, but Monica's not working blind. She's got someone on the inside." "Dat." I stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. "So what now? We get distance, regroup, and go public. The files, the recordings, someone will listen. And if they don't?" He glanced at me. "Then we make them." We drove until the gas gauge was kissing empty, then pulled into a 24-hour truck yard. Mark parked behind a row of trailers and cut the lights. He finally spoke after a long silence. "You realize she's not stopping, right?" "I know. She's not scared of getting caught. She's scared of being exposed." "Then let's expose her." He gave a half grin. "Now you sound like a captain again." I didn't feel like one. He went through the files again, this time using his backup drive. I watched the screen light up his face, tired, focused, wired on adrenaline. "You ever think," I said quietly, "that maybe all of this was her way of getting noticed?" He didn't look up. "She got your father's attention the only way she knew how, through destruction. Same pattern, just bigger." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Monica had always needed to win. It wasn't enough to be right. She needed everyone else to lose. Mark's phone buzzed. He checked the message, frowned. "Unknown number. Says, you shouldn't have involved Daniels." Before I could respond, the phone pinged again with a photo. It was the cabin. The front porch was on fire. I felt my stomach drop. Oh my God. Mark shoved the phone into his pocket. We're leaving now. 1. We ditched the Chevy behind a diner 3 towns over and hitched a ride with a long-haul trucker heading south. Mark paid him in cash, said we were a couple heading to Oklahoma for a funeral. The driver didn't ask questions. I leaned my head against the window as the miles rolled by. Every part of me ached, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames licking the porch, heard Monica's voice echoing in that calm, poisonous tone. Mark sat beside me, scanning through his phone, piecing together the next move. Daniel's data was backed up in the department's cloud. If we can get into that system, we'll have a record. You can hack a police network now? He smiled faintly. I can ask someone who can. By the time we reached the state line, dawn was breaking again. The truck stopped for fuel, and Mark disappeared to make a call. I stayed inside, sipping bad coffee from a paper cup and watching the sun rise over the interstate. For a brief second, it almost felt normal. Just 2 tired people traveling, nowhere to be, nothing chasing them. Then a voice came from behind me. Lauren. I turned, and my stomach twisted. Evan was standing by the door, hands in his jacket pockets, smiling like he'd just run into an old friend. Mind if I sit? He asked. I didn't answer. My hand went to the knife in my boot. He sat down anyway. You look tired. Motel beds will do that to you. How'd you find me? He shrugged. You're not as invisible as you think. Your friend's good, but not that good. What do you want? To talk. You and Monica, this doesn't have to go the way it's going. I leaned back, keeping my tone steady. You two already made that choice. He smiled again, but there was no warmth in it. You always think like a soldier. Win or lose, kill or survive. That's your problem. Monica doesn't want you dead, Lauren. She wants you to understand. Understand what? That she's insane? That she's right, he said simply. Your father left her nothing but resentment. You got his name, his rank, his respect. She got the house, but it meant nothing. She wanted balance. That's all. I stared at him. So, balance means murder? Balance means correction, he said. And you're standing in the way. Had. He stood, dropped a napkin on the table, and walked out before I could speak. When I unfolded it, there was a line written in neat block letters. If you go home again, it ends tonight. Mark walked in seconds later. What happened? I handed him the napkin. His face hardened. He crumpled it in his fist and said quietly, Then we'll be there first. Mark didn't waste time. He ripped the napkin in half, threw it in the trash, and said, We're not waiting for them to come to us. We go back now, get every piece of evidence we can, and make sure the police have no room for doubt. I didn't argue. The decision felt automatic, like returning to a battlefield you already know too well. There's a strange calm that comes with that. Your body stops asking if it's smart and just moves. By the time we reached my hometown, the sun was dipping behind the hills, the kind of golden light that makes everything look peaceful even when it's not. Mark parked a block away from the house. Cops still don't know? I asked. He shook his head. Daniel's backup went dark. If the department's compromised, we're on our own. I took a deep breath, the air thick with pine and damp earth. Then we finish it. We moved fast, staying low as we crossed the side yard. The house looked the same, quiet, still, welcoming. That's what made it so eerie. Mark handed me a small camera. Keep it running. Everything we see, record it. And the back door was unlocked. That alone was wrong. Monica always locked everything. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic underneath, the kind of smell that clings to hospitals and bad memories. Mark whispered, They've been here. The lights flicked on by themselves. We froze. Monica's voice came from the living room, smooth as glass. You shouldn't have come back. We stepped out slowly. She stood near the window, calm, arms folded. Her hair was perfectly brushed, her clothes spotless, as if she'd been waiting for company. Nice of you to clean up, I said. She smiled faintly. I didn't want you to remember the house as messy. Mark moved slightly to the side, positioning himself between us and the hallway to the basement. Where's Evan? She tilted her head. Why? You planning to arrest him? Something like that. He's downstairs, she said, eyes flicking toward me. Finishing what you interrupted. And I took a step forward. You mean your little experiment? She sighed, almost disappointed. You always have to make things dramatic. It was never about killing you, Lauren. It was about proving something. Proving what? That Dad's system worked. That my version worked better. Mark's voice cut through. You used your sister as a live test subject. She looked at him like he was missing the point. It wasn't personal. I laughed. Sharp. Short. You built a gas system to make me sleep forever, and you're calling it impersonal? You left me no choice, she said quietly. You came home and started digging through Dad's files, claiming what wasn't yours. You've always done that. Mark nodded once toward the hallway. I caught the signal. He was going for the basement. Monica, I said, stepping slightly closer. You're sick. You need help. She tilted her head again, the same calm smile still on her face. You think I'm sick because I didn't waste my life in uniform like you? I think you're sick because you built a weapon out of grief. The words landed, but only for a second. Then her expression hardened. He loved you more, you know. You're proof of it. The soldier, the builder, the hero. I was just the girl who stayed home, so I turned his legacy into mine. Behind her, I saw the faint outline of Evan at the top of the basement stairs. He was holding something metallic, looked like a gun but smaller, wired to a small transmitter. Step away from her, Mark said, drawing his own weapon. Evan smirked. You really think you're faster than me, Sergeant? Wanna find out? Monica's tone sharpened. Stop it. No one's dying here tonight. Funny, I said. You said that about me too. Evan's hand twitched on the trigger. Mark's aim stayed dead steady. Lauren, Monica said, her voice trembling now. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Evan said it would just simulate the symptoms, that you'd feel sick and go to the hospital, nothing fatal. That's a lie, Mark said. We found the schematics. The dosage levels alone would have killed her in days. Monica looked between us, eyes wide, uncertain for the first time. He told me. Evan cut her off, voice cold. You wanted results, Monica. You wanted to prove your father wrong. I gave you exactly what you asked for. She turned toward him, shaking. You said it was safe. He smiled, cruel and thin. Safe enough for someone who deserved it. She lunged for him, but he shoved her hard against the wall. That was all it took for Mark to fire. The gunshot shattered the silence, loud and final. Evan staggered, dropped the device, and fell down the basement stairs. Monica screamed and ran after him. Mark grabbed my arm, but I pulled free and followed. The basement was chaos, smoke, broken glass, wires hanging from the walls. Evan was sprawled at the bottom, blood pooling near his shoulder but not dead. He was reaching for the transmitter again. Mark kicked it away and aimed his gun. Don't even think about it. Monica dropped to her knees beside Evan, hands shaking. You ruined everything, she shouted at me. He was going to prove it worked. It did work, I said. You just picked the wrong test subject. Mark pulled out his phone. I'm calling it in. We've got enough evidence now. But before he could dial, Monica lunged at the control box on the wall, the failsafe valve. Don't, I shouted. She twisted the handle. A sharp hiss filled the air as gas began to vent through the ducts. Move! Mark yelled. We rushed up the stairs, but the door slammed shut from the other side, auto-locking. The smell hit immediately. CO mixed with exhaust. My chest burned. Mark was already pulling out a multi-tool, working on the hinges. Lauren, vent switch. He coughed. I stumbled toward the control box, vision blurring. The display flickered red. I flipped the emergency bypass. Dad had built years ago for safety testing. Nothing happened. Monica's voice came from below, faint, but still sharp. You can't stop it now. Mark slammed the crowbar against the door again. The hinge cracked, but held. We need airflow. I looked up at the duct above us, climbed onto a shelf, and tore open the grate. The hiss turned louder but thinner. I could feel my head swimming, my hands going numb. Mark finally forced the door open. He grabbed my arm, half-dragged me into the hallway. We collapsed near the stairs, coughing hard. Behind us, the basement filled with smoke. Evan's voice was gone. Monica's too. Just the sound of air systems winding down, one by one. Mark reached for his phone again, hitting 911 with shaky fingers. "This is Sergeant Mark Givens," he rasped. "Address Beckett residence. Chemical leak. 2 suspects down, 2 survivors. Send units now." I lay there on the floor, staring at the ceiling, my chest still rising in short bursts. Mark turned his head toward me, breathing hard. "You alive?" "Barely." He nodded. "Good enough." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The house that once felt like home now groaned like a dying machine, every vent hissing out the last of its poison. Somewhere down in the basement, the gas finally stopped. By the time the first patrol car pulled up, the night had settled into a cold silence broken only by the hum of the house's dying ventilation system. I sat on the front steps, wrapped in a thermal blanket, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The flashing red and blue lights painted the house in sick colors, blood and bruises over brick. Mark was talking to one of the paramedics, his voice hoarse, still coughing between sentences. He hadn't left my side since they dragged us out of the basement. 2 bodies came out next, one covered in a sheet, the other still breathing through an oxygen mask. Monica's face was gray and blank, her eyes open but unfocused. She didn't even look at me as they lifted her into the ambulance. A detective from the county department crouched in front of me. His badge read Henderson, and he smelled faintly of cigarettes and stress. "Captain Beckett, you're saying your sister and her boyfriend constructed a gas system designed to kill you?" "That's what the schematics and recordings show," I said quietly. My throat hurt when I talked. "You'll find the control box and data drives in the basement. My teammate logged everything." He glanced toward the house. "We'll have our forensic team verify. You're lucky to be alive, ma'am." Lucky. That word felt wrong. Nothing about any of this felt like luck. Mark came over, still pale but standing straight. "I gave them the flash drive, the hard copy schematics, and her confession recording," he said. "Should be enough to get a warrant for Laird Systems and whatever assets they used for funding." Henderson nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll coordinate with the state lab. You'll both need to give full statements tomorrow morning." Mark looked at me. "We'll be there." They took us to the hospital first. Oxygen therapy, blood tests, endless paperwork. I watched the IV drip tick down like a metronome while a nurse explained how close we'd come to organ failure. "Another few minutes in there, and you wouldn't have made it," she said, trying to sound calm. I didn't respond. I just kept staring at the ceiling tiles. Each one looked like a square of something unfixable. When I was finally cleared, they moved us to a waiting room. Mark sat beside me, flipping through a police report draft on his tablet. "She's alive," he said finally. "Monica?" He nodded. "They've got her under medical watch. Oxygen deprivation, shock, and a fractured wrist. She'll recover." He swallowed hard. "Evan?" He shook his head once. "Didn't make it." I didn't know what I felt. Anger, guilt, grief, maybe all of them tangled up together. "She'll stand trial," Mark added. "There's no getting around that. She'll find a way." I muttered. "She always does." He gave me a look that wasn't pity, just quiet understanding. Not this time. The next few weeks blurred together into interviews, reports, and courtroom filings. Henderson's team combed through the house, confirming everything we'd said. Falsified permits, tampered detectors, weaponized vent lines. Monica's fingerprints were everywhere. Every time I sat across from the investigators, I told them the same thing: Monica wasn't evil. She was broken. That didn't mean she should walk free, but I didn't want them to turn her into a monster she wasn't. Monsters don't cry at your graduation or make you soup when you're sick. They just forget how to love without hurting. When the trial finally began, the courthouse felt smaller than it should have. Reporters crowded the steps, throwing questions we didn't answer. Inside, the air was dry and stale, the kind that carries the echo of every bad decision made under oath. Monica sat at the defense table, hair tied back, wrists bound in light restraints. She looked clean, composed, like she was attending a business meeting. When our eyes met, she smiled faintly. Not cruel, just tired. The prosecutor opened with the words intent, calculation, premeditation. They laid out everything. The forged blueprints, Evan's emails, the chemical traces from the basement. It sounded surgical, almost boring, like reading a report on a failed construction project instead of a murder attempt. Then it was my turn to testify. I stood behind the microphone, the same kind used for press conferences and memorials, and for the first time in years, my voice shook. "I don't know why she did it," I said, looking at the jury. I don't know how you explain something like this, but I do know she believed it made sense. She thought she was fixing something our father broke. Oh, the prosecutor asked. Do you believe your sister wanted you dead, Captain Beckett? I hesitated, then said, I believe she wanted control. And if that meant I had to disappear, then yes. Across the room, Monica's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. Mark testified after me, detailing the technical setup. He spoke like the soldier he was, measured, factual, detached. When he finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked uneasy. The defense tried to paint Monica as a grieving woman manipulated by Evan. They showed photos of her caring for our father in his last months, of us as kids, smiling in front of the same house that nearly became my tomb. For a moment, even I almost believed it. But then they played the recording from that motel call, her voice saying, You don't understand what you've done. This was about balance. You can't cross-examine balance. When the verdict came, the words felt hollow in the air. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Fraud. 30 years without parole. Monica didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just nodded, like she'd already accepted it weeks ago. After the sentencing, I stayed in the empty courtroom while the reporters chased headlines outside. Mark leaned against the railing. You did what you had to do, he said. I shook my head. I did what anyone would do. The hard part's what comes after. He looked at me, brow furrowed. What comes after? I stared at the courtroom doors where Monica had been led out, trying to remember she's still my sister. He didn't say anything after that. Some silences don't need to be filled. When I finally left, the sky was clear, bright, almost cruelly normal. I sat in my truck for a long time before starting it. The same truck Mark and I had driven away in that first night. The radio still had his station-saved old country songs about coming home and losing everything that mattered. I turned it on, let it play low. Back at what was left of my father's house, the cleanup crews had already come and gone. The basement was sealed off, stripped down to concrete. The air was clean again. I walked through each room, touching the walls like they were parts of an old memory. Every corner felt both familiar and strange. I stopped in the kitchen where Dad's old wooden cabinet used to stand, the one Monica always said was ugly. Mark came by the next morning. You're really staying here? For a while, I said. I need to rebuild. He nodded. You always were stubborn. Military training, I said, managing a smile. He smirked. You sure it's not genetic? Maybe it was. Before he left, he handed me a box of tools. From your dad's shop. Thought you'd want them. I know. I ran my fingers over the worn handles, the initials JB carved into the side. Thanks. Mark looked at the rebuilt house once more. You ever figure out what to do with it? Yeah, I said quietly. Make it what it was meant to be, a place that protects, not destroys. He smiled. That sounds like something your old man would have said. Maybe he finally got through to me, I said. The morning sun came through the window, lighting the dust motes like gold. The air felt still, but not heavy anymore, just quiet in a way that felt earned. Somewhere down the road, a siren wailed and faded into the distance. I picked up a hammer from the box, turned it in my hand, and got to work. The hammer felt heavier than I remembered. Not from weight, but from meaning. Every dent in the handle told a story. Dad fixing the porch rail in '97, me helping him lay the kitchen floor the summer before deployment, the small gouge Monica made when she tried to help and missed the nail completely. I stood in that quiet kitchen, looking at the walls that used to trap poison, and started working. The new cabinets arrived 2 weeks after the trial. Oak, custom-built, simple lines like Dad used to make. Mark came by that morning with coffee and 2 boxes of screws. Thought I'd help, he said, setting the cups down. Besides, you'll need someone to hold the level. I grinned. You don't trust my precision? He smirked. I trust your combat aim, not your carpentry. We worked in silence most of the morning. It wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind that fills a room with the sound of something honest. Wood meeting wall. Screws turning steady. The kind of rhythm that keeps your head from drifting into memories you'd rather not touch. At one point, Mark looked around and said, You realize this is the first time this house has actually felt alive since you came back? I paused mid-turn. Yeah, I said quietly. It doesn't feel like it's watching anymore. He nodded, ran his hand along the cabinet's edge, and smiled faintly. Your dad built this house to last. You're just reminding it how. After he left, I sat on the floor and stared at the finished work. The sunlight poured through the clean windows, glinting off the new metal handles. I could almost see Dad standing there, nodding his quiet approval, the same way he did when I nailed something straight on the first try. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. No footsteps, no mechanical hums, no sound of anyone moving in the dark, just the steady creak of old boards breathing again. I walked into the living room, looked at the family photos still boxed up from before. Most of them were from better years, Dad holding us in front of the maple tree, Mom laughing at something we couldn't see. Then one caught my eye. Monica and me, teenagers, standing by the half-built porch, both pretending to help Dad. I was holding the hammer, she was holding the level wrong, smiling like she didn't care. I set it back in the box and whispered, "You could have just asked for help Monday." The next morning, I visited the cemetery for the first time since everything ended. The grass was wet with dew, the headstones lined up like quiet soldiers. I stopped at Dad's grave, brushed off the dirt from his name, and placed one of his old carpenter's pencils on the stone. "You were right about people," I said softly. "You can teach them everything, ethics, patience, how to build things right, but they still have to choose to use it for good." A breeze moved through the trees, cool and steady, and for a second I could almost smell sawdust and coffee. On my way out, I stopped by Evan's plot, marked temporarily with a wooden cross. I didn't say anything there. I just stood a few minutes, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. He'd made his choices. Monica had followed, and I was still here, standing in the space between what was lost and what was left. 2 months later, I sold half the property, the section where the garage used to stand. I kept the main house and Dad's workshop, renovated both myself. The realtor said I could have doubled the price by selling the whole thing, but I wasn't interested in money. I was interested in legacy. When the inspector came by to check the renovations, he looked around and said, "This place feels different, like someone finally treated it right." That made me smile. I started taking on local construction work again, mostly small-town rebuilds, veterans' homes, schools. My military background helped with logistics and project management, but I found myself back on the tools more often than behind a desk. It felt right. Building instead of fighting, repairing instead of avenging. One afternoon, while installing railing at a local community center, a woman approached me with a hesitant smile. "Captain Beckett?" she asked. "Former captain," I said. She nodded. "My husband served with you in Kandahar. Said you were the reason he came home." "Okay." I didn't know what to say, so I just shook her hand. She pressed a folded note into my palm. "He wanted me to give you this." Inside it said, "You build to protect. Don't forget that." Same words Dad had carved into the beam above our old workbench. When I got home that evening, I went down to the basement. The police had sealed off the lower section, but I'd been cleared to restore the workshop. The air smelled clean now, just wood, dust, and faint varnish. On the main beam, the old carving still showed through the sanded wood. "Build to protect." I traced it with my thumb. "Still here," I whispered. Later that week, I met Mark for dinner at the same diner we'd holed up in months ago. The waitress still had the same tired eyes. The coffee still tasted like burnt asphalt, but for some reason, it all felt comforting. "You think you'll ever leave town?" he asked, stirring his drink. "Maybe," I said. "But not yet. The house still needs me." He smiled. "That's a hell of a sentence for someone who used to command a platoon." "Yeah," I said, "but this mission's quieter." He leaned back, studied me for a second, then nodded. "You know, you could do real good teaching at the academy. Structural safety, maybe even field leadership. You've got stories that could save lives." I looked at him, thinking about it. Maybe one day. Now, the rest of the night, we talked about nothing important projects. Weather, stupid jokes about army rations. When he left, I sat a while longer, finishing my coffee, and realized for the first time in a long time that I wasn't running from anything. Back home, I took the final photo from the box and hung it above the workbench. Dad, Mom, Monica, and me. No labels, no captions. Just what used to be. The kind of memory that hurts less when it's on the wall instead of in your head. Before bed, I opened the window. The maple tree outside swayed gently under the porch light. I thought about how long it had stood there, 40 years of storms, heat, and neglect, and still it stayed upright. Maybe that's what survival looks like. Not staying unbroken, just staying. I locked up, turned off the lights, and ran my hand over the newly installed cabinet one last time. The wood was warm from the day's sun, smooth where it used to splinter. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a battlefield or a memorial. It just felt like home. And for me, that was enough.